Revelation 7, 9-17. After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne, and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. And all the angels stood around the throne, and the elders, and the 4 living creatures, and fell on their faces before the throne, and worshiped God, saying, Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom, thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen. Then one of the elders answered, saying to me, Who are these arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from? And I said to him, Sir, you know. So he said to me, These are the ones who came out of the great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will dwell among them. They shall neither hunger any more, nor thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any heat. For the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne will shepherd them, and lead them to living fountains of waters. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Now we have not only the martyrs under the altar, the 144,000, but added to that, this innumerable host from every nation on the earth. When the Lord scattered the northern 10 tribes of Israel, he didn't just remove the unbelieving people of the northern 10 tribes. There certainly were believers who were transported and transplanted. And while their mode of transportation in those days isn't what it is today, or wasn't what it is today, we can't think that some of those believers didn't continue to move on, didn't continue to move out and spread the word of the coming Lamb. That when we get to heaven, we will find from Old Testament times believers from the Germanic tribes, from the tribes in France, from the tribes in Spain, from tribes in Italy, from Africa, from what we know as Russia, Asia, the islands of the Polynesians. I think maybe we might find some American Indians, Aztecs, Mayans, whoever their ancestors were that were living in America. He says, from every tribe, from every tongue, from every nation, not limiting it to just the Mid-East. The Lord's word, and the Lord sees to it, and the Lord alone knows how far his word spread, even in ancient times. Now again, this seems to negate my idea of these things being referring to Old Testament times. And the commonly held thought is that these are now the New Testament believers. Inside Jesus speaking of the tribulation just prior to the last days in Matthew 24 and following. And yeah, it could very well be. If we go back and look at Hebrews 11, don't we find that in those verses we read in previously, that they underwent tribulation. Some of them were tortured, some of them were stoned, sawn in two. That's a tribulation, isn't it? Isn't it a tribulation to stand up for the word and for the faith? We can't limit it to just New Testament times. It has to be expanded beyond. Would we not say that there may well have been believers who perished in the flood? Because if you go back in Genesis there, when it speaks of the flood, Noah and his sons and their wives, 8 souls, were saved from the flood. It doesn't say they were the only believers. And all the rest of the world was unbelieving. So it's possible, isn't it? So what we find here in this 7th chapter of Revelation are 2 groups of believers in heaven, added to the innumerable number of the martyrs.